Thanks for coming, everybody, to October's Friday Live. Friday Live is, as you guys know, is our FileMaker community kind of contribution to our great, amazing community. This month we don't have a lot of things, but we have something I think that's going to be really useful from a more utility aspect. We're going to be talking about components and what they are. A couple quick updates on the on our editor. And also, if time provides, I want to show you a bit of a streaming AI agent that we built, and we're turning it into a bit of a framework that everybody can maybe use as an add-on. It's we've been doing a lot of research on that, so it's a nice, clean example of some of the stuff that you can do, which haven't seen anybody really do in our community yet. As usual, we have a hangout afterwards, and we will have our swag draw later on. A couple quick things here. And sorry, I gotta get rid of this stuff here. Just a sec. A couple quick things here is we just came back from Rome FileMaker Week, which was, if you haven't been to any, I know there's two groups of people in FileMaker. There's the ones that go to the conferences all the time and see the same faces all the time. And there's the people who never do. And if you haven't had a chance, try to get out to at least one or two of these events sometime over the next few years. And because they're so motivational, you hear, there's a networking aspect, the human aspect, but the technical stuff, just the conversations that you have sitting around, the little things as you're walking to the restaurant that somebody mentions a little tidbit of information and so on, are super, super valuable. So if you got the opportunity to participate in these, by all means do. We're going to be at Engage U next month. Hassan, Madalena, and I are going to be going there. We have a booth, and we'll hopefully get a chance to see lots of our community. There, we're doing a bit of a demo presentation, but I'm not doing any talks. And then we will be at Engage Austin in March. So I'm not sure how many people are going to that, but that should be good as well. Couple quick things I'll just mention really, really fast. We do have some event promotions on that are still left over from let me just pull this up here. Still left over from Rome FileMaker Week. And those are going to be ending in a couple days. We basically have $100 off, $100 US off of Citizen Developer Plan and about $500 off of the Pro Plan. So it's a significant savings for that as an option. And that is, those are going to be on for just a couple more days. We will have a promotion for Engage U, but it'll be for the participants on that one, I believe. So try to take advantage of this if you're sitting on the fence, or if you have any questions, you can always book a demo right from our main site here just by scheduling a demo. All right, awesome. I want to give you a bit more of an update here, and I'm just going to pause things for just a second because I got to turn off my notifications here for a quick sec. And sorry about that. But they are. Hopefully that'll be enough. Okay. Okay. Oops. So I want to give you a quick update on our GUI editor. Michael's not here to demo it, so I'm going to demo things for you, but I want to give you an idea of where we're at. And I think over the next month, we will go into a fully public, everybody will be able to use things. It's going to be very beta. So expect bugs and quirks and things like that, but we do value your feedback. We've gone through lots of little iterations and things in the UI and such on design. And so this is actually, this is kind of a huge image. So let's actually start with something like that. So one of the things, one of the recent changes, we've reworked this toolbar. Pearson's in the process of cleaning up this because we got a lot of information up here. And on my size screen, it gets a little bit congested. So we're going to clean up a lot of these things here in our next iteration. One of the big changes we've added is contextual keys. So now you can actually change up and down layers of items, copy and paste just some quick access keys. This will be retooled a little bit. And really importantly, you can edit HTML from here. So I have this image here, for example, and you can see there's a little bit of a glitch here because I can't see this actual one for this. But I can also do this from here as well. And I can open up my image editor here. And there's my image. And let's say we want to set the size of this image. I can say something like, actually, we can do a couple things. It's kind of interesting. You can edit HTML, dig down as deep as you always could, or can in BetterForms, but we can actually apply classes right onto the items themselves. So if I have this HTML amount, oh, sorry, it says price block. If I have this HTML block, I can specify something like width 20, and I can just change that width there from there, which is kind of neat. Another thing we've added is labels, and this is very FileMaker-esque, and it's also almost every type of graphical interface editor. You notice that it doesn't say HTML over here anymore. It instead says price amount because I just duplicated this. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know where we set it, but it is set in here somewhere. So there's somewhere there's the ability to set this label. I'm not sure if it's from here or not. No. So, but that's a new thing, and that's going to allow us to kind of find these items in here. So you can give things to that. Eventually, we'll incorporate some AI so these get automatically labeled, so you don't have to manage that there as well. The other thing is, as you already know, we already have things like nested groups. So for example, I have this group element right here. Let's go back to here. And in this case, I have a group that has 3 elements. It has this top, it has the middle, and it has a bottom element. And if I go into this top element, I have 1, 2, and 3 items. There's 1, 2, and 3 items. And they're kind of not really arranged very nice. Maybe I want to make this image at the top and change the structure. So one of the things we can do is we can go and we can nest groups. Layout panel groups. So I'm going to take a group, and I'm going to actually take a group that already has 2 columns, and I'm going to place this at the top here. You can see that. I'm going to put my image into that left column. I'm going to put my text into the right column, and then I'll keep this one down below where it sits. It's indented a little too much. Maybe I want to make this image a little bit bigger. So I'm going to get rid of this class on that. So my image is a little taller. Maybe I want to crop that or do something else like that as well. But let's go to, let's leave it like that. And let's see, we can adjust things like padding here. So I have some padding, I get rid of that. And there's a bit of padding on this one here. So we can get rid of that and so on. And that's kind of the workflow or the process. And this is a little bit slammed to the top. So let's jump back into the group. And let's add some padding on the top of maybe 20, 20, like so. There's a bit of a scrolling issue right now. This page isn't configured right, so my page is getting a little bit tall here. Let me just delete an element to make up some of them. There we go. So that's kind of the experience of what that's going to be like. There's still, like, as you can see, there's still some things to even out. It's exactly the same BetterForms underneath the hood. In fact, the schema editor is exactly the same under here as well. The difference is we have this UI. I'm going to be honest with you. If you are intermediate to advanced level BetterForms, if that's a thing, you'll probably actually prefer editing the old way. But if you're a beginner, this will be much more comfortable. But you can actually move a lot quicker when you can just edit code. And that goes for any system, right? Any environment. Low code is great, but high level of code gives you a ton of flexibility. And if you're proficient with that, you can develop faster. All right. So that's our editor. If there's any questions or anything like that. One new thing that we did add, and this is kind of interesting, is the ability to add custom properties. So now you can add custom fields and properties into here. You can convert any keys into a function. This is a placeholder, for example, and I can turn that into a function. Some of this UI is going to be subject to change. It's not exactly going to be finalized by any means. Um, for things like buttons, for example, you can set the class of the wrapper and separately set the class of the button. One of the on the near roadmaps, we will abstract all of these classes into one single style, and then you can apply that style all over, so you can reuse that design as well, and that'll be pretty good. So that's where we're at for now. Expect to be able to get your hands on this over the next month or so. We do have, because we're in a development environment and there's a lot of under the hood customizations, we have to port some of that stuff into production. We can't just deploy it like a regular BetterForms app because it sort of edits itself, right? So we have to, there's a couple caveats there. Any questions on that at all? All right, I'll keep going here. What I want to do is I want to jump into our main thing, which is a major feature that we've released about 3 weeks ago or so, maybe a little bit longer, but we've actually had this in BetterForms for quite a while. But we've made some small changes to the UI that make it usable for the general public. We got a lot more work to do there. But I want to talk about components and how they sort of play into your app building. The whole idea of a component is it's a chunk of code that is super, super reusable. You generally can design something, and when you design it, you can abstract or remove some of the things, like, for example, a button. You have a button and a label for the button. You can bring that label out into a piece of data, and now you can use that button in all over the place. And later on, if you wanted to use a button and maybe you wanted the button to change to a secondary button, you can do that as well. I believe, Pearson, you were going to talk a little bit more from a design aspect on components as well. So maybe what I'll do is we'll jump into looking at some of the UX of components and the concepts there, and then we'll look at the implementation into BetterForms itself. Hassan's got some examples, and then after those, we'll dive in deep and we'll build up some custom components and give you a really close idea of how we can use that. So I'll pass this over to Pearson.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, you summarized what components are pretty succinctly. I mean, it's really a fairly simple concept. Just from the outside, they're building blocks of code that you can use to create things quickly. But I'm going to share just a brief presentation on um, components and web design and kind of, I guess, the UX behind it. And basically the UX is more so for the developer than for the user interacting with the application or the software. But just to summarize or just to reiterate, what are components? They're reusable chunks of code encapsulating elements, like Charles said, like buttons, cards, nav bars that can be customized and placed throughout a website or app. So this streamlines code, makes maintenance a lot easier, and it promotes scalability within an app. Streamlining code, I mean, that's just once you create something, now it's made, and you can reuse it anywhere that you want without having to manually maybe copy paste code or um, maybe in this component that you've built, it allows for customization within it much more in an easier way than having to rewrite something. Maintenance, it's if you reuse a component, let's say 10 times through an app on different pages, instead of manually going through each of those pages and fixing or modifying that piece of code um, just on its own each time, you can just go to the source component, modify it there, and that'll apply changes throughout wherever that it was used. So that saves some time on the maintenance side, and scalability. That just allows you to build upon what has already been made. So you can use components to continue building something that you've started and continue to make it grow, maybe editing it, adding more functionality to a specific component. It also promotes a sort of a design system where you're not having to go back and remember, oh, what did I make that button look like on this page? Or, oh, I don't remember what the nav bar looks like. I got to go back and review and rewrite all of that or copy and paste it. It's all just, um, it's all very true to what the source component is. And the benefits of components, like I said, it creates consistency across an application where components ensure that there's a uniform look and functionality critical for creating seamless user-friendly interfaces and experiences. It increases or it promotes a faster development time where once a component is built, it's already ready to be reused. And it's like having a toolkit of elements that are already prepared to set up. And like I said, scalability. As projects grow, components help maintain order and reduce the need for redundant code or design elements. So how do they actually work? And from my perspective, I'm not a developer. So my experience with components are strictly just from using Figma. But in Figma, this design application, I can create a component and create um, variants of that component and reuse them throughout all of my designs. So for example, these are all components for just a simple button where I say, this is what a default button looks like, and here's what it looks like when you hover, and this is what it looks like when it's disabled. Here's a default secondary button, and so on. And I just kind of create this matrix of what a button is and what it looks like in these different states and what happens when I interact with it. And so from a button like this, just something very simple, it helps me really quickly create a modal, for example. So here in this modal, I'm using 3 different buttons, but they're all the same component. And this is at least how it works in Figma. Um, but it like I said, it's promoting a faster development time. For me, it's a faster design time. It's modular, where I can click and or I can just take this and move it elsewhere, or I can, maybe as a real example, I'll just show. I have this button that says add. I don't want the icon on the left side. I want it on the right side. And now um, I
Hmm.
can just add the icon there. And that's all based on having this component, this master component that has all these capabilities that I can reuse and modify elsewhere. These are all the same um, from the same source. I can turn that into a primary button. I can turn this into a tertiary button. Um, that's the main benefit of using components is just saving time, modular modular building blocks, and scalability. And I can share um, sort of the direction that we're going with components in the actual BetterForm software, but maybe I think it, uh, it might be more beneficial to show where we're at right now, and then I can show after where I'd like to take it in terms of the interface and how to use these components in BetterForms. Um, Charles or Hassan, I'm
Mhm.
not sure if either of you uh, are cool to share maybe how to use components in BetterForms right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Can jump to do that. All right, maybe what I'll do is I'll pass things off to Hassan if you're good to go.
Yeah, I can get started on the first initial examples. So I'll share my screen over here. Hey guys, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll get started with the component examples. One basic example we'll show over here is this message box element. Similar to how Pearson was showing, we just had one thing where he could augment like where the button was and it would change for all of them. This is a message box. So I'll go ahead and show what the code looks like inside of your page schema where you'd mostly be doing most of your editing. So you have 2 ways of calling a component. We have our snippets over here. You can have an HTML component or a BetterForms component. Over here, we have a BetterForms component, and above we have an example of calling it as an HTML component. If you notice, the code is fairly simple, and we just pass along some parameters. So I'm going to show what the code looks like on the component side of things. So over here, you'll have this components tab, which now should be available for everyone. If you click into your components tab, you'll have all your components over here. So we're going to head over to our first component, setter. Oh, not the header, my bad, the message box. So over here, this message box is labeled, we're saying title not set, use title key, message not set, use message key. So these are the keys that we're passing along. We simply pass title, give the title, and message, give it the message. And if you look at the component schema itself, it's made out of some HTML, and over here it has a message and title. These are the keys that we're passing along that we're changing. Additionally, there's also a status key here that we pass along, which makes it have different states. If you look at the HTML here, depending on the state, we have error, warning. It'll be different colors, and we can even pass along some icons over here. So this is a fairly basic example of component, just passing some minimal things. Anyone have any questions on this before I get into a slightly more complex example? All right, I guess I'll move on to a more complex example. Over here, we have example of components with buttons as well. I won't really touch on this since it's similar logic to up above with these message box, and just kind of pass along things. But what I will show is this modal over here. So I have two modals, and these are both the same modal, but being passed different things. So let's go with how the code looks like for this. So if we go into our code over here, this is the BetterForms component over here. So if you notice, I'm passing a lot of things. I'm passing a closed name action. I'm passing a submit action. I'm passing fields body and fields footer. So this is where nested components come into play. If we go over to my modal over here, this is the code for the modal. The top half of the stuff is generally just generic stuff needed for a modal to work. The main content is right over here, the modal content. We have a title over here that I pass along in the schema. And then we have the body and we have the footer. But if you notice how I'm passing the body and footer, I'm passing it as fields. What this is a nested component, which we have called schema over here. This schema component is just a generic component that all it does is it includes fields. And we just pass this fields along over to the other modal. This is an example of how nested components can work. And with that, we can pass both BetterForms elements or HTML elements. Over here, we have HTML elements and some buttons being passed into my component. I also have actions set up for these components that I'm passing along. And yeah, that's an example of how you could pass along multiple things. If you guys want to look at how the code for that works, is the fields body, I'm just passing an HTML block in one example. In another example, I'm just passing along some BetterForms elements. I can also pass it some visible conditions. And you can use calcs over here as well if you want to use JavaScript. And yeah, that's basically an example of a more complex component. I know Charles is gonna touch a bit more in depth on how some of these techniques work. So I'll pass it off to him unless there's any questions.
Before you do,
Yep.
so this modal here, so that one you're passing HTML dynamically into the modal. So you're changing the guts, the insides of the of your device. And then the other one, we're passing BetterForms elements, and there's pros and cons of both of those. BetterForms elements are quite heavily augmented with things like validation and conditional stuff and everything like that, whereas the HTML ones don't generally have that. So this is a great example, actually. This modal box, it's the same modal, and what's really neat is because the BetterForms elements or the HTML, doesn't matter, is dynamically passed in. That means you can send that from FileMaker. So if you have a database and the database decides it should show something different inside that modal, the database or the configuration, the schema can actually come remotely. And that gives it infinite amount of customization.
Another thing I didn't really touch on is normally when you do a show card modal, you have to pass the model along either using like action options model, passing along through app, or some sort of way to get your information on your modal. When you use a modal like this in the component, This is overlaying HTML. It's not a new page that's opening up per se. Because when we do a show card modal, that's a new page opening on top. So over here, I can reference my model directly and it'll take my parent page. Because this is technically just going above my parent page. So it can come in handy in some cases where you can just directly reference your parent page model and do your actions and stuff from here a lot simpler. So that's one thing to note as well to the benefits of using a component for modal. All right. If there's no questions over here, I'll pass it off to Charles for
There is
more
one,
examples.
yeah, sorry, there's one question. We have a
Oh,
show
it's in the
custom
chat.
dialogue. We have a show custom dialogue.
No, Charles,
Oh,
I was just answering your question.
oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, sorry. Perfect. So yeah, we don't really have this ability for I'll jump back to my screen. We don't really have this ability in FileMaker per se. We can sort of emulate it a little bit, and just give me a sec to set up my screen share here. We can emulate it a little bit in FileMaker by having some things, and there's been some talk and feature. I think one of the top features is reusable layout elements, right? So the closest we can come to a component in FileMaker, I think I would say is probably either one of two things. You could actually put JavaScript in and you make all kinds of reusable stuff, and just in some web viewer and everything's a web viewer. And I've actually seen it in an app where there's like 15 web viewers on the page and every button and everything was configured like that. And I thought that's kind of silly, because why don't you just make the whole page a web viewer? And that's what a hybrid app is. So you can sort of do it that way. The other way in FileMaker is to probably use some type of a secondary layout, like a card modal overlay. But again, you can't interact with the foreground and the background very well. So the difference between a component is the component sits in there just like everything else. So let's build some stuff. What I want to do is I'll start off with just some simple digging into the API. I'm going to create a new component here. And the new one starts off as a HTML component. There's two types of components. I'm going to reference the docs here for a second, and we'll jump into here. These have just been updated, but they're constantly, you'll notice the push notifications. Lin Shu of our team's been making quite a few edits and things like that to our docs. So almost every 2 or 3 days, you'll see some updates and so on. Components can effectively have two modes. One is the BetterForms mode, in other words, a JSON-based element. And the second one is an HTML-based element, right? So between the two, you can accomplish virtually anything. So let's look at that. What determines whether a component is an HTML element or a BetterForms element is the presence of the HTML key. As soon as I have HTML data, the component takes on that mode. If I don't have the HTML data, it'll take on a fields mode here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to steal one of, I noticed Hassan had a field in here. I'm going to steal this for a second so you can demonstrate that. And did I not rename this? Guess I didn't. Okay. Okay, so we're going to call it component comp. I'm going to call it comp1. Usually for a naming convention, for things that generally, and this is not a FileMaker thing per se, but it sort of is, and I'll get to that. Generally, stuff that contains other stuff, whether it's a function it's a class that contains a bunch of methods and data and things like that, or whether it's a component, or whether it's something that contains other things, in most languages is denoted with a capital first. A variable, the lowest level of something, is denoted with normally lower camel case. And sometimes if you're having metadata, in most languages, it's prefaced with an underscore on average. That's not a hard and fast thing. So we give components, I usually use the naming convention of having a capital, starting things with a capital. And the main reason there is it reminds me that this is a component and not just a smaller thing. All right. So I have some fields in here, and you can see this has field. It has one field and it's a field, but the field is not showing up in here. And in fact, the only thing that's showing up is this HTML. But if I get rid of the HTML, actually, let me just do it this way here. Oops. if I get rid of this HTML, you can see now this component just turned into a BetterForms element. Right? With that, everything that applies to BetterForms can be nested down, and these can keep going down. They can turtle all the way down deeper and deeper and deeper. All right, so that is now a BetterForms element, and that's how you would create that. And you can put multiple fields in there. You've been using this if you've ever used our, well, you most likely have, but if you've ever used our component, let me just put something in here again. We'll start just like, yeah. If you've ever used our HTML editor, that entire section with all the sliding, the sliders and the tabs, that is actually 3 components, right? In BetterForms, our actions editor is 3 separate components stuck inside a page. So each column is a separate component, and that makes it a little bit easier to maintain because it's a pretty complex piece. All right, so we have a field here, and if I want to use this, so this has default schema. Let me have a look. Let's just change some stuff, and then later on we'll override some of these things. But I'll call it name first. Your first name. All right, and it's bound to a key called name first, and that's it. Now, you notice this is really wide. This is starting to get into like a best practice now. Generally speaking, when you're building components, it's not the component's responsibility to determine how wide it is. It should fit into its containing space. Now, there are some caveats to that. A button may not always do that. A button may have a max width. And we'll look at how we can set those and override those in a second. So now I have this reference to component 1, and it's just an input field. Right, and I'm going to jump over to another tab here. And here is just a blank page, and this is in the examples or examples file. And I'm going to grab, I have a key called fields, and I'm going to grab a component. So I have a component BetterForms. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to place this in here. These two here are not the same as the way the component is acting. Okay, so there's 2 parts here. There's the definition of the component. In other words, what is this thing inside it? And then there's how do you call the thing, right? So I can call the thing one of 2 different ways. So in this case, I am calling it from another BetterForms element, right? So we have to enter a name. So my name is comp1, and that should be it. So let's save that. One small thing, it says component not found. And the reason for that is components are site level. They're global elements. And that means you have to refresh the page if you've made a change to your component. And there it is. There's my component there now. Now, it's kind of silly. Why would I just make this one input field a component here when I could have just pasted it in? But now I can put anything in here. I can style it any way. I can do anything I want with it. And I can reuse that everywhere in my app. So I change it one spot and it changes it everywhere. It also actually, on average, components are smaller because they have usually big chunks of code. So it actually reduces your overall app size and makes your load times and stuff a little bit faster. All right, so let's continue with this. So that's kind of okay, but it's a little bit boring. And I know Jean-Carlos is going to say, we don't want exciting, we want boring. He's going to tell me. Okay, so let's change this here. I'm going to get rid of this fields. I don't really care about this. And I actually want to use the HTML here. There's one small caveat currently with the invocation or the implementation of components is that I can't just put plain text in here and have it render. It has to be inside a wrapper. So I'm going to put a div in here. And there we go. Hello world. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to save this. Oops, sorry, save that. And I'm going to refresh. Oops. I'm going to refresh this. And there's my hello world component. Great. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now I want to make something a little bit more exciting. So let's start off with some, I think what I'm going to do is I'll build a I'll build a navigational header. And that'll give you a really, and this is a really, really good use case. The modal is probably the number one and navigational header is number two. So what I want to do here is I am going to jump back to my components, and I've started one called CD header here. Actually, I'll create it from scratch. So we'll call this component header. We'll call it Friday Live header. All right. And just to make sure that I call the Friday Live header from over here, I'm going to do that. And we should just make sure, I like to go in baby steps. And there it is. Okay, great. So that's my header so far. Not a very exciting header. So let's dial it up a little bit here. I'm going to jump over to my components or my HTML tab. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll introduce AI into this section. We don't have, it's context aware, but we don't have it dialed in for this area here yet. We do for the HTML editor here when you open this up, but not for this area here. Almost there. All right, so let's start off and let's just hard code the header. So we're going to put something in here. And actually what I will do is I'm going to use my AI assistant because I'm lazy, and I'm going to say, I'll say something like, create a header with a dark blue, actually make that a dark sky background, and a label that says invoice detail. Something like that. Okay, great. And I'm going to override the text here to be text white, because I didn't explicitly say that. There we go. Okay, so there is my header there. I'm going to save that. Let's save that. It's not really useful yet, but let's check it out and make sure it's showing up okay. All right, looks like a nice subheader. It's a sky color. It's a little darker. I'm not a designer, but it looks good enough for me. So first thing we want this thing to be dynamic, because we want to be able to reuse the component on different pages and only on some pages. So here's the page where I'm using it in, right? I'm calling it from here. And I want it to be sort of dynamic. So that means I want to set some value over here for this particular page, for this context. So when I go to page 2, it would pick up that value into the component. So what we do is we actually reference this code here is called the schema. And this is reference, we talk about that right in here in the docs. And let's jump over to here. So instead of having this invoice detail here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that with a merge variable. I'm going to say schema dot, we'll call it label or title. Title is a good name, title. There. I don't have a title. Okay, so now I look at my component, it's kind of feels like it's broken, but let's continue for a second and we'll show you how we can make a nice user interface for the developer as well. So we need a title key here, so we can just add a title. And we'll call it invoices pending, something like this. All right, so I've added a title key in my schema right in line. Now, of course, that could be a calculation from the model, or it could be anything you wanted, right? And let's jump back over to here and let's refresh. Invoices pending. So the takeaway here is this is now a dynamic component. If I use this in different pages, all I have to do is I just use this and I change that. Not bad. As your schema on your page grows, it's a real pain in the butt to go and have to find this and change this. And that's where we can have another level of inception, if you will. Also, if I forget to put this in, let's say I forgot to put this, I'm just going to exit out. But if I forgot to put that on, I end up with this thing and I have no idea what's going on, right? I haven't been in the app for a month or something, and I have no idea what's going on here. So what we do is we want a better developer experience for components. This comes into the next best practice. So instead of just saying schema, that might not exist. So you can say or, and then you can give the instruction, the developer a clue. Config the title key. I'm just going to remind them. to say configure the title key, right? That stays inside the component. And now we go back to here. Now we don't have it configured yet, right? The title key. So it says configure the title key. So the minute I see that, I go, oh yeah, I gotta add that. So I don't have to go and figure out what the component does. I kind of gave a clue and I said, okay, let me set a title key. And let's save that. Excuse me. And there we go. My header is working great. Let's continue to build it out now. It's not bad, but again, I don't really like editing this thing here. It's okay for some components that I can pass in these arguments. And by the way, they're actually called props in the rest of the world. We call these properties that we're passing in our arguments in if it's like a function, but in this case, they're props. And I'm passing in these props dynamically. We want the component sometimes to have defaults if we don't pass the prop in. For example, my navigation here, sorry, my header might have some back navigation. It might have something that's like a back arrow like that takes me back, and then it says invoices, and then maybe over here we have something else like a user avatar, and we have maybe a logout or some buttons and things like that, and it starts to look more like an app there. So let's try to build that. Let's continue to build that out. And the default right now, obviously there's no back navigation. I could set the default here by just saying what this is. Maybe it just says some header or something like that. I'm going to leave it as an instruction though, because I think that's kind of useful. Okay, next. I don't like doing this here. So what I want to do is I'm going to move this into a model key. And I'm going to preface the model key with an underscore, and that's just going to remind me of, I'll call it title, or maybe nav title. And invoices paid, invoices past due. I'm just changing these so you know they changed. So I'm going to add a key into my default data, right? That's kind of the global data for the page, or the local data for the page, I should say. And the key is called nav title, and save that. Now I could go here and this would be really convoluted, but I could say a calc, and then I could say model.nav title. That's kind of crazy. Instead, why don't I just reference the model directly from my component? The component sits inside the page, right? It sits inside the app, so it can see all of those things. It can see that context. So let's jump back over to here now. So I want, instead of schema.title, I want model dot nav title. Everything disappeared. When that happens, it's because it doesn't see model in the editor currently, and this is a deficiency of the editor right now. So we'll change that for the next release. Model doesn't exist, and in JavaScript you can't reference a parent when you can't reference a child when there is no parent, right? So instead we can add a options chaining here by adding a question mark, and that will evaluate to null. We've talked about that in past Friday Lives. And now again it says configure the title key. So everything's working great, and let's just test that out and make sure it is. Yeah, and let's go back to here and let's reload this now. Incidentally, when you see that flash, BetterForms caches the entire app in your browser, but it realized that the site changed, so it reloaded it. All right, so invoices past due. Now we've got a component that's useful. All I have to do is, and when I duplicate this page, so this is page 1, let's duplicate this to page 2. We'll go page 2 and save. And in page 2, we say estimates past due. Save that. I'm going to preview this. And there's estimates past due. When I change back to my prior page, invoices past due. Same component, right? Back and forth, the same component. This must have a on-form load or something on there. But I'm using it dynamically. That's what we got so far. All right, now's when the components get actually useful, right? It's almost useful now. And you can see that this is really easy to configure by putting this stuff in data. You separate all of the crafted the design and you keep just the stuff that you want to use in here. If you don't already, value lists are a really good example. Put value lists inside your data rather than inside your schema. Much easier to touch. And if you ever want to bring it from FileMaker in the future, like if it's maybe states, if it's or provinces, and you want a list of those, but maybe something changed or you want to exclude some, or it's going to come dynamically from FileMaker. It's a really easy change to make. All right, so now we got navigation here. Let's add some back arrow propagation stuff, like, sorry, not propagation, but back, thinking AI back propagation. Let's add some back arrow on here, back chevron. So I'm going to actually use our AI assistant again, and I'm just going to tell it to, on the left-hand side of the title, I want to add a left-pointing chevron. All right, that looks pretty good there. And I think I'm just going to keep it like that. And I'm going to start off with just that. All right, so there is my chevron here, and I have my stuff, but I don't want to show the back propagation all the time, right? I don't want to show the back navigation all the time. And I also have to decide where this back goes, because if I'm reusing the component, back could mean all kinds of things, right? It could be back to the list view. It could be back to close a modal or something like that. It could be almost anything. So let's start passing in a conditional here. So let's jump back to our usage of the component, and let's add another key called, this says nav. So I'm going to preface them all with nav, because I think that's going to be easy for me to remember in the future. Nav show back. Yeah, we'll just do that. Show back. We'll do like that. And that's going to be a Boolean probably. So we'll say true. All right. Nav show back. All right. We're going to grab over to here. Let's jump over to our component now. And this is the icon, you know, that we can add conditionals with vif equals. And this would be model nav show back. All right, I think that is it. Let me just make sure. Boom, boom. Yep. Okay. So model nav show back. Oops, got one more in there. There we go. And I think I'm on actually my second page here. So one of these pages has a show back. The other one doesn't have it. So that's kind of interesting. So let's see. Let's jump over to here. And I added that in. So I'm gonna have to refresh here to make sure I get the latest one. And there's show back. And if I navigate to my other page, I don't have slugs associated with these. So I have to manually do this here. And components, page 1 here. All right, this page here does not have that key, right? And this is where the defaults come in. On average, it won't, or sorry, on average, by default, it won't show up. So when I preview this, we got invoices past due. And if we could go back over to the other one, there, this one has now. So now we got a little bit of more of a dynamic component. One has a back button, one doesn't. That might make total sense for a list view and a detail view, right? I probably should have used better words. All right. Is that making sense kind of so far, what we're doing here? Or am I kind of going too fast, too slow? Don't all speak at once. All right. If you have questions, by all means, just feel free to interrupt if you have on things. So now I got this component.
Sorry, Charlie. I think there's a question in the chat, actually.
Yeah. Let's have a look. Sorry. Thanks. All right. You'll probably get to this from Jake, but I wanted to include, just in case, what's best practice in BetterForms for passing functions to components? Yeah, okay. I'm about to get to that right now, actually, and parameters. Okay, so let's jump to that. Parameters, I can answer really quick. It's probably just easiest to stick it in the model because that's probably where the data came from. Functions, on the other hand, are a little different, like named actions. So this component with the back arrow button, I need to have that do something. I should have a hover case on there too, and then probably space it out a bit more. It's kind of hard to reach into here without clicking onto this. This is so close that to me it feels like, and Pearson probably, I don't know, he probably have a better opinion, but feels like this is too close to here. So let's change that and let's add some back stuff on there. First, let's define what we want to do. What does back mean, right? We could, if I was building this, back most likely is contextual from the page that you're on. So I would probably in this page, and this is page 1. Let me go to page 2 again here. Page 2 is the one with the back button. And I would probably have an action called back, right? Let's see now, go to back, I'll call it. And this would have some kind of path action. Oops. Path action. And that path action would be link 1. We'll call it link 1, something like this. And that is sitting in the context of this page 2, this page 2 here. So when I hit this, it's going to say go to that particular one. That's hard-coded, right? Hard-coded. That way I can adjust that for every page. If I want to make something a little bit more flexible, a little bit more dynamic, maybe the back, maybe you can get to invoices past due from a customer detail, and that should, in that case, it would show all of that customer's invoices past due. But maybe you also go from all customers list view, and in which case it would show everybody past due, like it's filtered. So there's different backs in there. So in that case, what I would probably do is a couple different ways here. Is you can move this into a global action, and you could pass a parameter in, right? The parameter might be set by the caller script, the script that you got to here. It's just like navigation in FileMaker, right? You have to decide whose responsibility is it to maintain the history of where you go back to. And in this case, it would be the calling page. It's their job to make note. And I would probably save that in the app model where the back button, lost my mouse here, where the back button goes. If, on the other hand, I wanted to reconfigure this like an action button, right? Maybe I have an action button that says do some special action, and we could put that over here somehow. And I wanted to configure that on a separate page. I can also do something, and this is where Hassan did earlier here, is we could put something like nav back action. I'm going to put named action. I could pass the action in itself too, but I'm just going to put the name in. Action, named action, name. This is really long, but it's for example here. All right, so this is the back named action name. So that's going to be the name. And I called mine go to back, but it could be anything you want. Go to back, something like that. So now I want to run this named action here. Copy, save. I want to run this from my component, and only when, of course, that component is showing. So here's my icon, and let's just give us a little bit of room. You can do this here. That's totally fine, so we can see it, and we can say @click equals, and we want to run a named action, and the action name is not going to be hard coded now. It's going to come from schema dot name back action name. So now my component will run the named action contextual to that. This is the equivalent of like perform script by name, right? In FileMaker, that's what that would be the equivalent of. And let's give that a try. It's going to go to a page that doesn't exist because we don't have I didn't add the navigational slug, so I'd expect that. And let's see, and that's a sad trombone. Did I save this over here? All right, guys, now I'm going to need your help. Named action is go to back. I have an action called go to back. Yeah, it go to back. And let's see. @click named action schema dot. I'm missing something, but it does work. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm gonna probably, it's one of those things that I can't quite see. Let's have a look. Let's do this here. Did I refresh this too? I think I did. Let's go here and let's Oh, I got some clues. Named action undefined was not found for action. Okay, so we're not seeing that. Why not? Nav back named action. This is what it's called. Schema.
You're referencing schema, but it's in the model.
Oh, thank you. See? I knew it. All right. Bonus points. Thank you. See, it's one of those things that it's like, I know that you can do it, but if I stare at it, it could be a half an hour. Right? So, okay. Did I save? I think I did. Let's do it again just in case. We'll come back over here. We'll do a refresh. It should go to a page that doesn't exist because we don't have that page, right? That's what I expect to happen. And yeah, there it is. And all right, and it's going to an error. This app doesn't have an error page here. Okay. So now we've got this dynamic part. Let's do a little bit more, and then we have a pretty functional navigation bar. Incidentally, this thing that I'm building out is really this thing right here. All right, it's not going to be that one exactly, but it's the same idea. These here are slots that are inside this navigation component, and you can see it. This is an example. This one here is the same navigation bar as here, as the same as this one doesn't have one, so I'm going to go back. It's the those are the same, all the same navigation bars though. All right, so let's look at how we can add some more slots, and then now we can have a really flexible navigation, because quite often when you're on different pages, you need different stuff up here. The BetterForms is an example. We have this thing here, we have this and this here, but then we go to another page. Maybe when I go to here and there's nothing there, but there's stuff over here, right? So it changes around, but it's all the same nav bar. It's all the same piece in here. Okay, so let's jump back to, oops, kick myself out. And what we'll do is we will add a, we'll add some more stuff onto this. This is a Friday Live header. Is that the one? It's the one. All right. So I'm just going to shrink this up a little bit so we got a little bit of room to see. I want you to think about this nav bar, and this is kind of a quick HTML element or design lesson here. Think of it as a container. The container has one item, two items. That's this thing here. And I want it to have an item over here. I want it to be a flexible area where I can put multiple items, in fact, because I don't know what's going to go in there. So I want to create an area that I can put stuff in. And maybe I might put something in the middle as well. So in design, in HTML, it's called, or in Tailwind, I guess you could say technically in CSS, this container, we're going to apply flex onto it. And flex basically means that the things, all these things inside will more or less take on the same height. There's three items, 1, 2, and this parent 3. They'll take on the same height, and their behavior, their width behavior will be determined by them. So I want this one to be itself. This one I want to be kind of greedy. So that means, what I mean by that is if my text in here is longer, I want this to expand. So I'm actually going to make this one kind of go all the way across to here and around. And this one here, I want it to fend for itself as well, but only to be the size of the items inside it. Okay, so we have some examples on Flex and Flexbox and all of that stuff, but you don't really have to know a ton of them, right? The main one that we want to know here is just called Flex. Flex, and now I can add in another item in here. So I'm going to add in, I have this keystroke thingy, and sometimes when it jumps in, when it hijacks my keyboard, it doesn't quite copy the stuff properly. I gotta adjust it there. Okay, so here is going to be my slot, if you will, and I want to put stuff in here, right? This some things there. I want to put that in there. I want this one here to be greedy. So we say flex 1, that means greedy, flex 1. And now when it's greedy, it tries to bring all the way over, and this one fends for itself and it comes over to here. That's exactly what I want. And if I was to show the chevron, perfect, right? Doesn't bump anything around. Problem is, this is hard coded. And this is where Hassan's example, where he had a component, he had another component here called schema. So we're going to put in, I basically want to be able to put anything in here. So I need an empty component to put that in. So I'm going to grab this schema component. You can see that it sits right here. It's got a field in here. We don't actually technically don't even need that. Shouldn't break anything. And it's just an empty component, totally empty. The key is it's going to become a BetterForms component, so I can pass stuff in. So how are we doing for time here? I'm going to finish up in a second. Won't go too deep. Here we are. All right. So I want to reference that component. And according to the docs, if we look in the docs and the usage of custom components, we can look at using the components. And here's how you use it as JSON. And here's how to use it as BetterForms, or sorry, vice versa. So I am going to grab that and paste that in here. Right away, it says, hey, I can't find this component because it's called my component. So I'm going to change this to schema, schema, and it's found that component. You notice it still has the old one because I haven't, I don't think I've hit save here. So let me go back to that one here and save that. And all right. And now finally, let me go back to my component here. And there might be some caching thing here. That's okay though. All right. So now I got this one component here, and I have to say where I want to say where the fields come from. So I'm going to put a fields key, and the fields will come from the schema this time. Yeah, schema. And we'll call it dot right slot, something like that. Schema dot right slot fields. That looks correct. Save. Okay. So now that means over here, when I use my component, I need a key called right slot. And now I can put in BetterForms components. So let's find an email field. I don't know why, but let's just use an email field. And I'm going to get rid of this predefined thing here. And that should do it. All right. And we'll need to refresh and let's see. Boom. Okay. Email field got greedy here. All right. By default, BetterForms fields naturally take up the parent size. So I'm going to have to tell it to be smaller, there. So I think what I want on here is width. Is it fit? I think that's what it is. Yeah, there we go. All right. And we need to make this one, we need to adjust this one to be a little bit more greedy here. And I might have overwritten that. And some things, what is some things here? Oh, this is gone. There. That was a prior example. Let's see. All right. And something is hogging up our space. Width fit. See if that's enough. We'll build out some examples, and over the next few months, we're going to be making the ability to share components. So you don't have to, there we go. You don't have to figure this stuff out, and it doesn't make sense to have a label up there. Well, but you can. But now I have this component that I can use for just a simple header. I can use it for back navigation, and I can pass in fields into it as well, just the same. All right. And it's all in one piece. When I change the color, it changes it for every page, right? So I think my other page should not have the component. I don't know if I have it. Let's navigate to the other page. Save that already. And let's jump to the other page here. Page 1. and we'll preview that, and then we'll finish with that. There. So that component there and this component here are the same ones. But the difference is, and of course, you'd change the styling. Again, I wouldn't have that label up there, but I might have a drop down, and I might have the user's avatar. In fact, I can put anything I want on this page. So if I wanted to change that one, let's actually do a little avatar thing here. And let's say we get rid of this and we put some HTML, and let's grab a piece in here, and we'll finish with this. Let's do something creative. This bit of HTML is going to go into a header on the top right of my app, period. I want you to create the username Charles and a round avatar. Use white text, and don't worry about the background color. Okay, there it is. I said top right, and it's actually right aligned it. It doesn't really need to do that, so I can get rid of all of this opinion that it's already kind of included in here. Oops, not too much, just that. All right, I think that should be enough. Save, and I gotta adjust it a little bit, but you get the idea. I've created this little avatar type thing, and that's only on this page. When I go back to the other page, if I go back to the other page, wherever it is, not in my history anymore, but if I go back to the other page, the component doesn't have that. I'll pause for a couple questions, and we'll jump subjects here.
There's some questions in the chat.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So it would be great to have a repo on GitHub. So we've played around with this option quite a bit. We keep revisiting it, and it sits on our feature request list, and we kind of push it back each time. It's like, how do we integrate Git effectively? Because we could build an integration. Excuse me, we could build an we could build an integration for BetterForms to Git, but what do you do with it? Like, what would it do? The main idea of Git is that it's a repository for code version control, but we can do that already. So I don't like how I'd love to have that integration, but I just don't know what to do with it. So I'm open to those ideas if you want to jump on a call. Thank you, Sammy. I hope that gives you some ideas about components. We recorded all of this, so it'll all be in our video, and we'll clean this up because you can see this thing is not the most proper. There. The AI assistant will integrate that over the next 3 weeks, and that'll have really good knowledge of the components and be able to pretty much build stuff like this out of the box, or very close to it, because we can dial it in for this use case. And I think if we don't have any more questions, we'll leave it at that for today on
Charles,
components.
Charles. Yeah, I have a question.
Please.
Did we still have any time?
Yeah, lots of time.
Okay. Go to the first step on the components, and I just wonder how to do all these components for the FL underscore header using programmatically.
So if I wanted to call a different component, that's really interesting. I want to call a component one type of component or another type of component. So let's go back to my first page. And I have, let me see, what do I have here? Message box. That wouldn't be, okay. Maybe I want to show a message box instead of the header, right? So there's this one and this one, and I want to switch between message box and header. So if I jump to my examples, let me try, oops, sorry, I'm already in there. Let me jump, it's over here. Example 2, let me example 1 page. Example 1, page 1, okay. All right, so I'm in example page 1. I'm going to add radio, maybe radio button. And I'm going to add a radio button in here. And it's going to say component select component. And it's going to be type radio. And one of these is called, oops, is called message. Was it message box? And the other one was called FL underscore header. Let's start with that. Let me just make sure baby steps here. Preview. Oh, we need some spacing around here. So let me just do this, padding 8, just so I can see it in the middle a little bit more. All right. So let's just make sure that this is actually picking the right values here. It says gender. I want to call this component selector. Okay, so let's change that. And there it is there. So, okay. So I'm just making something I can change. I'm just wiring it up, right? Just really quick. And I hope this is Prana, I'm hoping, oh, is this, if I'm on the wrong track, if I'm not answering your question, let me know. Model, they're
Okay.
gonna come. Selected component. Okay. Now, here's the name, right? Well, it's BetterForms. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to give it a default one to begin with as well. So let's go. FL Friday Live underscore header. So this should create a default name for the selected component. And when I set the value, it should change. Okay, I'm afraid to go over to that tab. Let me just make sure. Boom. I could do this all day. Is that the type of idea?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you can have all kinds of things, really complex things. And I'm just calling them from different, based on the data, totally different component. And that's the cool thing about how everything's connected under the hood. So title
You could
not set,
also-
obviously. This one I'm not passing in the right properties.
You could also just put a visible calc on both components, right?
You could. But what if you have
That's
50 components?
Right.
Right? Like what if, you know what I mean? Like it's trade-offs. I would normally do a visible calc most of the time when there's 2, maybe 3 items. Right? 3 items, you start to get an if with a condition. 2 items, you can get if with an else, right? So 2 items is generally my limit most of the time. But there are times when you do something that's totally dynamic.
in my modal example, I used a visible calc over there for showing and hiding the modals.
Can you add show component or component in a named action?
Yeah. Okay. So you would probably turn it on in that, like you'd have it there with a visible and named action would probably programmatically set it because the named action is code, whereas the component is schema. It's page on
Yeah.
like the main named action is JavaScript, whereas the component is effectively HTML. So you would probably just have a spot where it's sitting in. But that's an interesting thing because you can actually, like using Hassan's example, let's say he's got his modal, but his modal is
Yeah.
universal only to that page. What if you wanted that modal to be anywhere in the app? Right? So an example of that is, what if you had a component that no matter where you are in the app, you needed to jack in like this? Right? That's a card. Is it a card modal? Yeah, this is a card modal. No, it's not actually. I don't think. Now that I think about it, I don't think it is. Let me see. No, it's not. Okay. So this is some code that's actually sitting up here somewhere, but when it comes in, it moves itself. Like it's not in the it's not in line. It's above everything else. So that's exactly what that's sort of doing. It's not sitting. The editor window here is an actual component. Believe it or not, this whole thing is a component. This one's a pretty complex component because it's got all kinds of stuff in it. So we actually built it in a separate page, and then we just copied that code in so that we could have all of the stuff around it for like all of the variables and everything and be able to actuate it and make it work, and it actually works in this upper page on its own. But this is just a component. And here's an example of a component changing shape. When I do this, this component now jumps up into this area. So it's sitting technically in a slot, and it's in a slot with the page. But when I do this, the component doesn't, it's in the slot, but it's not, it's a absolute or a fixed position. So now it can float around the page. And there's some extra code, so you can't like throw it off the page. You can't get rid of it, because that was one of the things when we first built it, right? It's like, where'd it go, right? So now it does that, and it sort of is kind of smart. But that's exactly a component there. All right. Well, if you have more questions, by all means, chime in. I know it sometimes takes a bit to think, okay, well, you start thinking, when can I use it? Don't go crazy is my advice. Don't say, oh, I made everything a component. There's no advantage to using a component only once if you're never going to use it again. It's when something becomes painful or hard to maintain, as Pearson had said, that's when you sort of switch. This was never a component. And some of this stuff, I think this one, I'm not even sure if this one here is fully a component. I know these ones are all components, and some of the other pages. But we don't want to just jump and use it for everything, because you're making extra work for yourself, right? Kind of take the FileMaker philosophy, right? Just kind of code it until it becomes a pain, and then you address it from there. You optimize later. We will be adding the ability. One of the things that's we're currently working on our roadmap is the example pages and the ability to add ranking. Hassan mentioned this last Friday Live, and now we have designs for that, and they're going to be built out over this next month. And we also want to include components and the ability to share components. So that means you can say, oh, I like that. He's got a nice little widget. Let me grab his widget and just drag it and plop it in. And as far as the drag and drop editor goes, we have I don't have it open anymore, but we have provisions for components there too, where you can just drag them and plop them in. So you can build things out with these building blocks. I think it's going to be super, super powerful once we open that up. All right. If there's no other questions, I want to jump to one more thing quick. I want to show you an example that I made that was quite popular in the last couple times people have seen it. So I want to show you some stuff on our taking advantage of the built-in BetterForms AI streaming proxy. Fancy name, but basically it means it's a chat window. And what makes it kind of special is that it's pretty easy to implement into your apps. Couple workshops ago, we built an example. I just live coded an example over 2 workshops. It's about 2.5 hours of coding. We haven't released a video because there's a lot of pauses and things like that, and it has to be edited. But what it does is it basically gives you this, and I'm going to let me just grab a new window here, because I have one that's called there. So imagine we have a window like this, and this is effectively a chat window, and I have a database here, and my database has got 1,007 people, and I see Valeria, which is a series I'm watching right now. And I want to find out some information about her. So basically what this is an integration with GPT. In this case, it's using OpenAI, and it has some agency. It has some functions in the back end which it can access the database. And this is in FileMaker. So this is a web viewer, right? You can see it here. There's just a web viewer there. It's referencing a BetterForms app, and it's actually passing in a little bit of contextual information as well, so it can know where it is. And I say, let's find, how old is Valeria? Let's find everybody who's 40 years old. list the first names of all the 40-year-olds. That sounds like I'm desperate for a date, but let's see. So I hate that box. That's a FileMaker thing. But here is the results of the data. So that's interesting. Oh, Rosemary. Let's go Tanya. Okay. Show me Tanya's info. And here's Tanya's info. Right. There's a little, I gotta fix this thing. It doesn't look like a Tanya, but my pictures don't line up with the people. Now, here's where you can go with this simple framework. So let me just do this. I just want to show you really quick kinds of things that I haven't seen anybody building yet. I've seen them do pauses and things like that, but you if you're gonna have this experience, I think you have to have it streaming like this. This is using Markdown and it's also using HTML. So that means it can return formatted stuff in here. If we gave it access to things like charts, it could return charts and all kinds of data here too. This framework here is exceptionally simple compared to for what it can do. And here's what it is at a glance. If you're familiar with the BetterForms hooks, there is an integration into this database, but it's only for callbacks. So I'll show you in a second here. All right, so there's basically a few scripts in here. There is 2 scripts that handle this chat window. So when I hit enter here, it sends the information with FileMaker perform script, I think it's called, execute script, something like that. And it's calling this one called send message. And this is passing some arguments through here, through the payload. And one of the arguments is a context key. And for this particular example, I have context 1. So it's just broken down so you can break it down easy yourself. And it's calling BetterForms chat context handler. So it's basically saying, hey, I'm on this certain page. This is the prompting and this is the stuff I can do from this page. Okay, so let's jump into the handler. And we coded this all up the other day, but here's the handler here. It's grabbing some arguments near the top and the messages, and then it's finding a template. The way it's finding a template is it's for this particular context, the template is a prompt and it's searching a table. So it's dynamic. It's searching a table based on a hard-coded example here. In our BetterForms editor, we do almost the same thing, but we make it dynamic because there's so many tabs and there's like, 50 different contexts. So in this one, I just have one. So it's getting the template using get column. It's just returning data. It's not a JSON array. It's just data. It's merging that into the template with a simple substitution, right? So it's sticking that message in here, but it could do other things that are contextual. Maybe I'm on a client's record. So it could put the client's record, the active record that's in FileMaker. It could merge that into the template as just the same. And then finally, it's, let's see, I don't think that's being used. Finally, it's setting up a channel. In my environment here, it's using GPT-4o Mini as the assistant. And there's an ID for the assistant because there is a small amount of configuration that I've done on the in OpenAI, and I'll show you that in a second. From there, payload, it's building up a payload and it's calling the BetterForms streaming endpoint right here. And this is just a wrapper that wraps this is just a wrapper that wraps the interface that does an HTTP call in here. So that's all that's doing. All right, so it's doing a call to an endpoint that BetterForms has. This is free for everybody, and you can do this with a test drive account as well. And basically, it is calling that endpoint establishes a stream, and it talks to the LLM, which in this case is OpenAI, passes it my credentials. They were mixed into that payload there. They came from my preferences table over here, and it established a stream, and it passed all the data that it has. Over on OpenAI side, the OpenAI side is aware of some capabilities of what can be done over here in FileMaker. And I'll talk about those in a second. Those capabilities are called functions or tools. and we've given it several tools, about 3 tools here. Then it starts to stream the data back. The data comes back and it goes back to the BetterForms cloud. The BetterForms cloud is directly connected to this streaming proxy API is directly connected to our messaging system, and it sends the message back into the browser. There is a bit of JavaScript that sits in the browser that renders it and streams it and then scrolls the page. What you actually need to configure is this. You have to have a BetterForms account because we are using, technically you could almost do this without a BetterForms account, but we're using the ability for, we have to call back with these functions to orchestrate the data in FileMaker. So let's look at what the functions are. What we do is over on OpenAI, we set up I have an example called chat demo. It says you are a chat assistant that is embedded within FileMaker application. You can call functions as needed. That's it. That's my prompt so far. And then we've created these functions. Oops, sorry. And we've created these functions. So what's a function look like? Well, I've created 3 of them. One's called find people, get invoice, and get person. Find people is one I just made just about a couple hours ago here. And basically what this function does, these functions are not really code. They are a JSON schema that defines what a function would, the API of a function. So it basically says the name of the function is called find people. What does it do? Searches my people table by age. Actually, it's not by age, by various args, because it was by age originally. Do I need to have the parameters? Are they strict or not? No. Are there any fields that are required? Because you might have to have some required fields. And then I specify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential arguments that I could pass in. And the first one's called name first, and it's a description. So first name starts with. I said starts with, but I could tell it a bit more information that is FileMaker-esque in terms of searching, like ... and that kind of thing. Name last, last name starts with age, and age is a string, and you wouldn't expect age to be a string. It should be a number, you'd think, but not if you're going to do stuff like that, like FileMaker. So technically it's a string. All right. Or range of ages of the people for range format. I give it some bit of hinting here. Gender, male or female, and let's see, and age of the person, and I can also search by ID. So I basically gave it an API definition of what it could do, what it can do in FileMaker. So where does that sit in FileMaker here? Let's jump back over to FileMaker. And this was going to be my presentation, but it was rejected. So I'm bitter about that. That's okay. You guys get to have it. And what we're doing back over in FileMaker here is I have a function. So we've used the BetterForms API endpoint. You could use technically something like Claris Connect or something to jack into FileMaker. And the BetterForms endpoint is calling, based on the function call, it's calling this particular script. And this script, you can see in the top, there's function name and function arguments are broken out. And I'm just going to FileMaker, enter find mode. That should be off, I think. Set fields, all of those fields, and perform find. Originally, I had it just with a find mode. And I didn't realize, this is something I never realized. If the variable is not defined and you say perform find, like I never use this. I never do this. I always go like this. You can see how noob I am at FileMaker these days. But I usually just go in and set the dollars amounts in here like this, right? This one's not being used. But if those are not defined, it actually puts a $sign in there. Did you guys know that? I did not know that. Like, if I specified these find requests and dollar is not defined, the variable is not defined, it pastes in a $sign. It pastes in the literal. So it's like, so anyhow, so I was wondering why it's not working. But nonetheless, it just does a regular FileMaker find. It's an OR find. And I think I said in the instructions later on, We paste the find in here, go to layout. I'm truncating the records. If there's more than 20 found, I'm just limiting the amount of data because I don't want to return a million zillion. The purists won't like this. They'll want you to use a get record count and minus the number and all that stuff. That's fine. I'm not going to have this. I'm okay with that. And people, JSON array, I'm formatting this using a custom function with BetterForms, which will take a list. I think we can do this now with FileMaker now. I think you can go array from list or something like that. New instruction. Does almost the same thing. And then I'm adding in additional instructions. This could be some contextual things like we didn't find John Smith, but I found one that spelt really close. It could say something like that. So it doesn't fail. Exactly. So in this case, I'm telling the LLM, yo, we're returning how many records, right? Found records for a logical and, sorry, found results are a logical and of the supplied arguments. If you need an or, perform separate finds. So I'm basically saying back to the LLM, by the way, here's my data. And if you need something more special, here's how you get it. That's it. The other one, like get invoice, is really just doing a get column and it's returning the invoice. This is exactly what you do in a BetterForms hook. Exactly the same, right? So now I've given FileMaker, or sorry, given the LLM these tools, and I can imagine what you can do with this. If you have an email routine, you could say, find everybody who has a past due invoice and email them. And literally, if you already have the routine, other than the 5 scripts that I've shown you, you can do that all out of the box like that. I'm going to put this into a probably into an add-on, and that way you can just kind of drag it onto your layout. But there's not really that much. It's just some scripts and stuff like that. This is in our example file. It hasn't been updated to the latest one. We'll try to get that out in the next week or so you can see what's happening in the back end here. And this will make it is available in a template, but the template may not be public until I just dial it in. So I think it's pretty cool. Hope it gives you some ideas of types of stuff that you can do.
Yeah, Charles, that adding the
yes, sir.
dollar sign, it's just a native FileMaker. Like even if you do set variable, it'll add in the dollar sign.
Yeah, but it doesn't. But it takes it like those are empty. The dollars are empty. So what I did is I said I get last. What is it? Get last modify or edit modify last find, and I saw all the dollar signs plus my age of 40 in there.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yep, got it.
But yeah, and then it didn't find anything. So it must have stuck those literally in there, right? And I thought that's kind of it's a little thing, right? But it's so that's why I had to do the set fields because they'll fail safely.
Yeah.
All right. Let's you want to see some more capabilities of this or no? Like, I don't know, is that something that interests you? Imagine that with your clients. You can give them a chat window and they can do virtually anything.
Well, let's go for it.
All right. Thank you. Somebody. Okay, so let's find, I think I got one called invoice. This invoice is searching by ID person, right? I don't have much data in here. So let me just go to invoices here. And invoices here. And I think, I'm not sure if this is ID product. Maybe I don't have an ID person. I thought I did. I'm trying to think of what we can do here. What else? I haven't built too many functions in here, but if you have some ideas, because you can basically, as soon as you give it a bit of agency, like for example, I could say, I could have it edit the fields. I could have it go back and find that person and edit some fields. Get person is a single. This is person by ID. Oh, let me show you this. Let me show you the calls coming in from the LLM. That's actually kind of interesting. So let me go back to here. And I am going to do this. and we'll talk to the LLM. Now, remember, the LLM is talking to FileMaker. FileMaker is doing insert from URL to OpenAI or to BetterForms Cloud proxy. That's going to OpenAI, and then it's coming back straight into here from BetterForms. But if it has to get a question or a function, it'll come over here. So I can say, how many males age 30 do we have? All right, something like that. So that should be, it should do that in 2 parts, right? So there's the call coming in from the LLM to AI, and then it's returning to people. So let's jump to here and look at the call here. So what it's done is it's doing an API call effectively into this is a new service that we've added in the latest helper file. It's called AI. Actually, I don't even know if it's a fully new one. I think it's just the hooks that have it, called AI Assistant Call. And from here, it's doing a function call. You can see this is just the data that's passing in. You can forget about all of this. And here's the arguments: age 30, gender male, right? And it's calling find person or find people. It knows to call that because I gave it that definition. Right. And then it returned all the data, and here they are here. Right.
So Charles, real quick to interrupt. If we're adding this into an existing file, we have to add an additional script into each hook set called AI assistant call.
Yeah, you'd have to add, if you already have BetterForms in the file,
Yep.
okay, if you already have it there, then you're adding BetterForms chat. This is the hooks for this because there's a bunch of examples in here, right? So underneath the common hooks, there's a new one here called
Yep. Okay.
AI assistant chat. And that's branching off into those functions.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's so the integration consists of adding the web viewer, adding this plus BetterForm stuff, adding, in my case, I just put 2 scripts as a bit of a framework, and I could go for more in here if I wanted to, depending on how I want to break things down. And then finally adding the functions themselves, what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's 3, 5, 6 scripts, roughly. And that's it. All right. I wish I had some better data, and maybe for next month, I will make some better data for you, because then you can see the power. It's going to be a little bit hard to maybe wrap your head around what you can do here, because all you see is returning data. But what it can really do is I can say, I can do something like find the women with names starting with A, comma, then take the youngest one and find a male find the males, make a little dating app here, the males with the same age. This one's a little bit more complex because it's got to do a few different things here. So it should, in theory, find, okay, the youngest female. Okay, so hold on, let me wait till it finishes off here. I got to fix the scrolling. Sorry about the scrolling here. Just a sec. Okay.
Can you
So
show the
let's
helper
go.
file for this? How many?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, great question. All right, great. Where to go? Okay. Ignore that. That's a ping for a monitor. Here's the 2 calls here. So here's the first call. Name A, gender female. Okay. So it's return the data. Here's the response in the data here. It's a bunch of them. Then it found the youngest one, which these are random data. Age 3, gender male. So now it's finding the second batch. Now, imagine you told it to email them and then update their CRM and do all of these other things, right? That's where I'm going with this stuff. That you can do. 7 males, age 30 in the database. Here are the details. All right. I don't know what else to ask it about that because I don't have that much data in my database. Excuse me. But that's kind of the idea. Super powerful. And your apps are going to definitely need something like this in the very near future to make them AI worthy, because otherwise they're going to compare it to some other database that you can do queries against. Now, the beauty here is you know who the user is in the chat. You know the data, so you can add your own built-in FileMaker security just in here. You can filter them out exactly like you would in BetterForms. It's really the same thing in many ways, right? You can filter them out. You can do anything you want there, and you can return all the stuff. You're not allowed to do this. You're allowed to do that. The fundamental gist is with 6 lines of code, we've given FileMaker agency. All right. Now, if you have a database of things like standard operating procedures, here, let's actually do one more. I'll show you how you make one of these, like just to prove to because I don't think I don't know if we're appreciating the power of this. So I'm just going to change this. I want to call it find products. Find products, and we'll just create a quick one called finding products. And in finding products, it's going to be, we'll just change this around to products, and I am going to get column as array, my products as JSON where products is products is active. Maybe something products is, I have an active products. What? I know I have something like this. Products, brand, color, ID, model as JSON. Sorry, products, event. Oh, let's go to events. Okay, I'm going to use events because I don't think I have a field in there to find events. Oh, I say no wonder. Sorry, I'm thinking I'm in my the other database here. Okay. Let's do this here. Products, products. There must be something. Brand, color, price. Is there a price? Year, model, brand. Let's go color, I guess. We get products, JSON, where products. What I wanted to do, sorry, I don't have, I'm connected to the wrong database. I really need I wanted some data where you can create some more semantic inferences here. Basically, I was hoping that I have another table of a bunch of events, and it has a bunch of descriptions of the events, and you could fetch those descriptions and then take the descriptions that it fetched and put it into some other kind of text. Right now, we're just returning data because I'm not asking it to do anything with that too much. But anyhow, I'm going to leave it at this. I hope that gives you a bit of an idea what you can do, and if you have some ideas, happy to help you out and implement that. Any other questions? A couple here. Agents and functions very powerful. I've been exploring them. Very cool how you're working here. Yeah, they're pretty cool. Thank you, Vince. What we're actually working on is like some stuff we did almost a year ago. What we're actually working on right now is a multi-agentic workflow and the framework for that. And that's really, really interesting because that's when you have a agent, and you have several agents. You have a customer communications agent, and that's been prompted to communicate in the style and the voice and tone of your business, and it knows what it can and cannot say. And then you might have a sales agent, which would go through and look and decide which products are most suitable for a given client. And you'd call those. And the only thing that makes it an agent is that it has a narrower scope of what it can do. Where the real power comes in is being able to have one agent call these other agents. So it knows based on the task, it can plan stuff out, and then it can call all these different agents and act upon that. I just wrote a custom function. I'll show you. This is kind of interesting, I think, for some people. If you are doing anything with prompts, may not have a use for this, but if you are doing anything with prompts, we this is basically it's a big custom function, but it's a custom function. Actually, I didn't even write this. AI wrote it, to be honest with you. I just went through a bunch of iterations because it doesn't know FileMaker all that well. But it's solid. And what it does is it takes a prompt and it converts a I don't have one here. It takes a prompt that you have, and sometimes you have a prompt and you're an admin versus you're a regular user. Well, that's two different prompts technically. So you can create a prompt template and you can put conditionals. If the user is admin, include this piece of text, merge text. If they're else, and it supports if and else and evaluate the condition. If the user is over 18, you can use different types of terminology. And then else, you don't put a prompt really simple. One of the things we really learned is when you're working with AI is keep the prompts physically small, because there's a good chance that you're going to make mistakes in your prompt when you're talking to the LLM, and it's really hard to it's hard to figure out what the LLM is understanding. It might take the inference of a certain word and totally misinterpret it from how you see it. So by having these dynamic prompts and with a prompting language, scripting language, we can do this control a lot more. So that's a really, really cool thing. There's a bunch of other techniques. If you're interested in that, we'll book another we'll have another talk on that stuff. But if you're interested in writing your own agents, I'm happy to share all of our findings. All right. If there's no other questions or anything like that, we'll jump back. We're getting close to our time here. There's a few people that didn't put in names. It's not our fault, I guess. Alrighty, I am going to. The rules are you have to be present. If you're not, then you don't get. Oh. Chris, are you here? Going once, twice. I don't see. Boom. James was here, but he might have dropped off. I don't know. Is he still here? James, no. It's amazing
look like-
statistic. It's amazing the statistics of like the chances of people not being here. Like it's incredible. It seems abnormally high or disproportionately high. But I guess he only. Sammy was here. I know he was. He just sent the message. Sammy's here. All right, Sammy. Congratulations. Madalena will reach out to you and get you hooked up. All right, that concludes our this week's Friday Live. Unless we got any other questions or anything that we can include. All right, if not, we're going to kick around, but I'm going to stop our recording now. And otherwise, great guys, have a great holiday. If you're in Malmo, we'll see you then. Ciao.